So, oh my goodness, I'm so excited for tonight's team Zoom. It's April 8th. And oh my goodness, what an amazing month we have just rolled out for us on a red carpet, handed to us on a silver platter with the free signups, you guys. Oh my goodness, we have to take advantage of this. There is no reason that all of us can't sponsor 10 people each. So with 150 orders, free PC sign up, oh my goodness, it is just a no-brainer. So this is the month to just blast into the stratosphere and, really create this ripple, this wave that I know all of you want in your business. So thank you for tuning in. We have such a special call tonight. I have been giddy all day long. Well, really giddy ever since I met this special lady, Alece, at our VP conference last November. Our eyes met and we were glued to each other. It's just so amazing how it's true. You find your tribe in this business. And I've always said that, matching hearts find each other. And Alece is just such a special lady with a matching heart. And we just instantly bonded and connected. And so I just can't wait for you to hear from her. I believe Alece has been with Arbonne for 14 years. She is going to share her journey. She just became a brand new national vice president, so at the top of the company, you guys. And she is direct to no one else than Cecilia Stoll. I mean, how amazing is that? She was Cecilia Stoll 11th MVP. So wow, what an honor to have her here with us tonight. She's a mama of a 6-year-old little girl and a wife, and I just can't wait. I can't wait for you guys to hear her story. She literally blew the roof off of the place when we were listening to her, and she's like a soft-spoken, sweet little lady, but she packs a punch, and I can't wait for you guys to get to know this beautiful, beautiful friend of mine, Alece. So go ahead, Alece, take it away. We can't wait to hear from you, and we can't wait to ask you questions after.
Okay, sounds great. Oh my goodness, I tell you what, sweet little lady that packs a punch. I'll have to write that on my my brand board. Thank you so much, Tammy. It's great to be with y'all. It's great to be with your whole team. Tammy and I, we did catch each other's eyes at Cecilia's retreat across the room. Y'all know your Tammy. I mean, she's vibrant. She's brilliant. It's easy to be attracted to her. So I was so thrilled to get time to get to know her, hear her story, share mine. And like she said, we're instantly bonded. So it's a joy to spend time together and with each other's teams. So thank you for letting me be with y'all. Everything I have to share tonight is from my own story, my own journey. And so I have struggled with a lot of different things in my Arbonne journey. So I hope for those of you who are struggling, you'll be like, okay. So I can still struggle and make it to the top of this company. The answer is absolutely yes to that. And I hope to give you some nuggets that will help you in getting through those challenge points. Because, this is meant to make us better. And if we're willing to engage that process, you will get better. Your business will grow because of it. So I'm super excited to just share what I've learned and how I've grown, and particularly around this topic of belief. There's a couple of nugget points. So for those of you who are like more type A and you like those like bullet points for your notes, I'll try to remember to say those, but I'm more type B. I'm very laid back and relaxed. And so if I forget and that's bothering you, ask me at the end and I will give you the actual points. But I believe belief is probably the thing that holds most of us back. It's easy to look at NVPs and say, oh yeah, they're actually getting the best that Arbonne has to offer. But for me, probably never going to happen. And so that belief that what Arbonne has out there, like the very best, is available for each and every one of you. I'd be curious as to what you would rate yourself, like on a scale of 1 to 10. And you don't have to say that, say what it is. But I do encourage you to tell Tammy or tell your area managers, your upline, where you fall on your belief scale, because if it is wavering, I know that's part of what's holding you back. That's part of why your business isn't growing. So part of my story is I did start Arbonne. I actually got my ID 14 years ago last month. I got my ID for the discount. I was curious about the products because a friend couldn't stop talking about them. And I'm like, who can't stop talking about their skincare? Like nobody except for you. So I want to see what this stuff is all about if you are raving about it. And my friend Beth never actually pursued Arbonne as a business. So this was pure love for a product. So I went to her house and the consultant did a knock it out of the park job of casting a vision of what was possible with Arbonne. She shared Eye on Arbonne stories of some successful people and what they had achieved in a pretty short period of time. And one of the stories she shared was Dr. Deanna Osborne. She's an ENVP, and she shared how Deanna replaced her medical salary and her husband's medical salary in 2 years. I didn't know what MDs made for a living, but I knew it was a lot. And so I thought, okay, a lot plus a lot is a whole lot. And if they can make that much income in 2 years, I've got to take a look at this company because my husband and I were struggling to make ends meet, not by any poor planning of our own, but because the companies we both worked for had budget cuts and we lost our jobs and we were trying to piece together income, and it was a stressful way to live. And I never wanted to give that much power over to an employer again. But trying to freelance was a really tough way to go about life because you never know when your next, paycheck's going to come in. So Arbonne showed up right at the perfect time for me. But I will tell you, while I was captivated by the business opportunity immediately and couldn't stop thinking about it for a month, I had zero confidence that I was going to be able to do much with this because I don't have a background in sales. I'm not interested in being salesy. I don't have a background in science or in cosmetics or in nutrition or anything that would make you think Alece would be successful at this business. I was just hoping I could make my $30 back. It was $29 to get your ID as a consultant back then. And I was hoping I could find one or two friends who would be interested in the products enough just to help me earn that little bit back. So if you want to know my belief when I started, it was like almost non-existent. For the next 2 years, though, I did plug in somewhat to a system that had been handed down from Cecilia. There was 6 people between me and Cecilia. And so she didn't even know I existed for a while because she had never met me before. There was just people who were like kind of playing with Arbonne and just passing it along. And so that it finally trickled down to me. So I didn't actually have an upline that was really holding me up by the hand and working with me. So it's really important to stay connected to your upline because they want to help you succeed. And so those first 2 years, I struggled a lot, and especially with belief. But I would hear Cecilia on these phone calls. So this was back in the day when there was no Zoom, there was no Facebook Live. We didn't have social media. We didn't even have texting back then, you guys. Like, I feel so old saying that. But we had these audio, like everybody dialed in the phone number and then you listened to your upline speak. And so I learned about those calls and listened to Cecilia every month on these calls. And she would talk about how these components about belief. And it really, I couldn't put 2 and 2 together. It didn't make sense to me. I don't know why. I'm not typically too thick-skulled, but for whatever reason, it didn't make sense to me until 2 years into my business. I was at the Global Training Conference, GTC, and there I was an area manager. So I had actually managed to make it to area, fumbling along and really letting fear dictate my business. I was a struggling area at that GTC, and I had one teammate with me. And I started chatting with another sideline sister in Cecilia's Nation, and she was a struggling area manager as well, and she had no teammates. And I remember patting myself on the back thinking, okay, Alece, this is hard, so it's okay that you're struggling. And I actually let her story give me permission to stay where I was. Please don't do that. That serves no one. It does not serve you. It does not serve your team, even if you only have one other person with you. It will not serve other people in your life. So allowing yourself to stay stuck, never a good idea. So learn from me, who did it the hard way. Don't do that. So fast forward 3 months later, there was this huge event in Oklahoma City in July. I decided to go, and I actually got 3 teammates to go with me. I was so proud of myself, but I was still struggling as an area manager. You guys, the 4 of us together, were doing 3,000 in volume. Is that not pitiful? That's pitiful. An area doing 3,000, clearly I wasn't going to stay area long. And there were 4 of us. That tells you hardly any of us were doing much activity at all. So I want you to can anybody relate? You don't have to raise your hand, but can you relate to being like in the depths, the pit of despair, for those of you who are Princess Bride fans? That's where I was in my business, but yet I still got these people to trust me to fly to Oklahoma. Oh my gosh. And I was so proud of myself, but guess who was also at that event? This other woman who was also the struggling area manager. And guess what? She wasn't struggling anymore. She had a team of 16 at this event, and she was in qualifications for regional vice president. And I was like, wait a second, what just happened here? I was actually better off than she was at GTC because I had a teammate there with me. And here she had had this massive growth in 3 months. How do you do that? And so we're all asking, how'd this happen? What's going on here? And she told the story. Cecilia gave her time to speak because we went to Cecilia's house after this big event. And she had Tanya, this woman, share her story. And she said, I was on the phone with Cecilia telling her all the reasons why Arbonne doesn't work and why I can't be successful. And Cecilia said, well, Tanya, it sounds to me like you just don't believe. And she said, well, what do you mean? She said, well, it's a decision that you make. And Tanya's like, so you mean I just like wake up in the morning and I decide to believe and then I just do the things that decided people do? And she's like, absolutely. It's that simple. And Tanya was like, are you kidding me? So she's like, okay, well, I'm going to do that. I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning and decide to believe that this will work for me. And I'm going to go to work. And here she was 3 months later in qualifications for region. Her team finished region. They're very successful. And so hearing this story, I thought, oh my goodness, I have wasted 3 months. And if it's that simple that I need to make a decision to believe that it's like a done thing, it's not something that takes time to grow, like, you know, wine and cheese get better with time. Belief does not. Belief is a decision you make and then you act on it. And you move forward with it and you keep acting on it, even when the evidence in front of you doesn't, very good, Shuey, I like that. Even when your evidence doesn't seem like it's coming together, you still act on that belief. And so I was actually pretty ticked off at this woman, at what she had accomplished, and I hadn't. I'm not that really competitive of a person, but what she did lit a fire under my tushy, and I was like, all right, it is time to make this happen, because if it can happen for her, I'll be danged if it doesn't happen for me and my team too. And so I decided it's time to decide to believe. And I needed to do a couple things in with that. I needed to confront some things that weren't serving me well, and I'll get to more of those in just a minute. And I also needed to engage in some practices that would serve me well. And one of those practices was engaging in a gratitude journal. I hadn't realized how much of my mindset had gone down the slippery slope of scarcity thinking. And scarcity is when you look around you and there's not enough time, not enough money, not enough resources, not enough networks, not enough friends, not enough help, not enough energy. I mean, you fill in the blank. Abundance is when you look around and you don't negate where you still have goals and where you want things to grow, but you're filled with gratitude for what you do have. And Cecilia gave us a goal to keep a gratitude journal and every night write down 10 things we were grateful for. And that by the time we finished that, like filled up a whole journal of that, our business would be in a different place. And I realized I needed to do that. Somewhere along the line, I had become less of a happy, positive, cheerful person, and I'd become more cynical and victim-minded and scarcity thinking. And I'm like, I do not want to keep going down that track. So I got a journal, and every night, pretty much every night, I wrote down 10 things, even if it was the same thing some nights, like, okay, I'm grateful that I have a roof over my head. Like, even when in the beginning my business didn't look like things were changing that much, I just kept at the activity of abundance, gratitude, doing the do. And you guys, when I finished that gratitude journal, I'm not even kidding you, I was a regional vice president going to pick out my new Mercedes. So there's power in belief, making that decision to believe, but also backing it up with some other things that serve you well, and focusing on abundance and gratitude serves you well. Sometimes we just need that cold, hard truth right in front of us, like Tanya was that for me, to light a fire in our britches and to get us to act. But there's another piece to belief that I had heard a lot. I'd heard this phrase, belief has a sound, belief has a sound, and I could not figure out what that meant. And then I was talking with Cecilia one time, and she actually explained what it meant to me. And so when you believe that these products and this business really, truly can change lives, people are going to hear that in your voice. They're going to feel the passion and the conviction, and your words are actually going to move people. NVP Miranda Burcham shared it 2 retreats ago of Cecilia's, like she said, are your words moving people? Because if your words aren't moving people, then it could just be that this person you're speaking to is just one of the no's that you've got to hear so that you can find the yeses that are coming. But it could also be they're saying no to you because they don't hear the passion and conviction. And you know what this gig sounds like when you strip the passion and conviction away? It sounds a lot like a sales job. And I don't know about y'all, but I am not interested in doing sales. Yes, sales happen in our businesses, but I'm interested in helping people transform their lives to become the best versions of themselves. And if my words aren't moving people and causing them to say, I don't know what she's smoking, but she believes what she's saying, and I need to hear, I don't know why, but I need to hear more about this. And because there are so many people building network marketing businesses with every other product on the planet, we have to separate ourselves from the lady down the street who's selling Norwex, and our friend at church who's selling 31 bags, and like all these other businesses, like, oh, do you want to buy something? No, I'm tired of buying things. I actually want to save more money than spend my money. And so when people interact with us in Arbonne, it needs to feel and sound very different than every other consultant with every other company out there. Cecilia said it this way once. She said, Alece, if you're not speaking with passion and conviction, and if your team is not speaking with passion and conviction, you're just an Arbonne employee who is showing up for the job, punching the clock, putting in your time, and that moves no one. And so she said, but we all probably have teammates who are out doing the Arbonne do. You have activity on your calendar. You're talking to people. But month after month, nothing's happening. And you're wondering, like, what's the problem here? I'm talking to people. Where's this going? Why is nothing happening? And sometimes we just have to pay those Arbonne dues. Like, that's just part of, our rite of passage. And you have to have the no's so that when your team gets no's, you can totally identify and you can encourage them. But again, not every no, it shouldn't be months and months and months of no's and no responses. And so if our words aren't moving people, then it's probably that we aren't inspiring anyone beyond anything than just a sale. And I don't blame people when they say, I'm not interested in sales. Your first light bulb should go off. Ooh, maybe I'm not speaking with passion and conviction, because if this sounds like sales to them, then I need to change that. Now, there's sometimes people just see that what we do is sales, and we are selling a product, and so they're just, their perceptions are wrong about that, and you can be as passionate and conviction, full of conviction, and they're just not meant to join your team. Timing's not right. So please take some of that with a grain of salt, but it's really worth evaluating. Am I speaking with passion and conviction? And if I'm not, I got to get to the root as to why. And here's what ENVP Carlita Nelson says. She spoke on this a couple years ago. She said, a lot of times we go out sharing the Arbonne story, but instead of telling the true Arbonne story that is full of power and hope, like what I heard when I heard about Deanna Osborne replacing her medical salary and her husband's medical salary in 2 years, like that gave me hope that our circumstances could change. That was a true Arbonne story. What oftentimes we end up doing is we share our version of the Arbonne story, which is watered down. It has fear, it has unbelief, it has insecurity, it has doubt all mixed into it. And when people hear that version of the Arbonne story, it's not very enticing. It's not very interesting. It sounds like another one of those things that my poor friend has gotten into, and give them a couple of months and they won't be doing this anymore, just like most of their other friends. So what we have to do is make sure we're telling the full-on true Arbonne story without our fear and unbelief and doubt and skepticism and all of that woven into it. We need to say what is true about Arbonne. Even if you're not sure you believe it for yourself yet, you have to get to this place where you can say, this is what's happening for people, and I am willing to bet my money that if I work at this, it can happen for me too. Because you know what? I've met these people at the top and they're normal. They're so normal. And I'm normal, and so I can get there. I mean, we're all our own brand of like unique awesomeness at the same time. I don't want to say we're normal in the sense that, just any old person could become an NVP, because that's not true. You've got to be willing to become the very best version of yourself and be coachable to get to the top of this business. But you definitely don't have to start off as NVP material when you enter Arbonne. You just have to be willing to grow and decide to believe and have that passion and conviction of what is truly possible, and you move forward in it. And so we got to be unapologetic, and we've got to tell the true, unwatered down story that Arbonne has to offer, and we keep telling that over and over again. I think a lot of our teams are putting effort into doing the Arbonne do, and they're not getting the results because there's a crack in their belief, and they're not speaking with passion and conviction. And so the other person's like, well, you don't seem to be all that, convinced that these products or this business is worth joining. So why would I even bother? I mean, people are so crazy busy these days. You've got to give them a reason to rearrange their schedule. And how you talk about this with such passion that they're like, whoa, okay, I'm completely shocked that I want to hear more, but I want to hear more. Because that's where I found myself. I'm like, I cannot believe I'm even entertaining this idea. I'm going to be a complete disaster. I had friends tell me, Alece, you're going to be a complete disaster. But I thought, you know what? I will always wonder what if I don't give this thing a try, and they're not going to pay my bills, these friends of mine. So why would I give that much power over to them to help me make that decision? So thank you for caring about me and speaking your truth about me and I guess love, but I'm going to move forward anyway. And I'm so glad I didn't listen to them, because you guys, a lot of those initial friends, they're still struggling. They have not joined my business. They have not joined my team. They're barely product users, if they use products at all. A number of my initial friends don't even use the products, and they're still struggling financially. And we are in a totally different place now, my family and I. And so my heart goes out to them, but I'm so glad I didn't listen to them, because clearly they didn't have a better solution. So speak with that belief that, oh my gosh, Alece, was going to be thought she'd be a disaster, and she's made it to the top. So if you don't think you're a disaster, then great. You're several steps ahead of where I was. So take that and run with it. Here's another truth bomb about belief, though. This one will really get you. Belief isn't about trying harder. It is not about trying harder. We've created a circuitry in our brain that is our default drive. Traveling harder and faster down that same road only gets you farther away from where you want to be. So this is not about trying harder. This is about changing our beliefs about ourselves and who we know ourselves to be. That has to change. Who we know ourselves to be has to change. And there's, like I said, the circuitry in our brain. We've been thinking a certain way for so long. You actually literally in the biology of your brain have created these grooves, these highways that are deep. And it takes time and effort to put roadblocks up so that detour, you can't travel down that road anymore. You've got to go this detour this other way. And it takes some time to create those new pathways for your brain to travel down. And that's where you change who you know yourself to be. And I'll talk more about that in a second. But here's going to illustrate this some. I don't know if you've ever heard of George Hincapie, like give me a wave. Okay, I've never heard of him either. Now wave at me if you've heard of Lance Armstrong. Okay, a lot of you, yeah. So Lance Armstrong, amazing, professional cyclist. Little known fact is in these huge races where Lance gets all the recognition and fame, there's actually a guy who rides in front of him who takes all the wind so that Lance can ride behind him in his draft and save his energy and his muscles and conserve everything he needs to, so that when they get closer to the finish line, Lance can, he has the energy to cycle past the servant dude on his team who was in front of him, taking all of that, the brunt of that wind, the whole race, so that Lance could, cross the finish line first. So George Hincapie is that dude. It's called domestique. The domestique is the rider in front of, the star. And so George Hincapie was the domestique for Lance Armstrong for a lot of races. You have to be a formidable athlete to be the domestique. In a sense, you have to be better than the Lance Armstrong because you have to cycle that far, taking with nobody to give you draft to ride in. And so George, amazing athlete, he still wants to up his performance because he realized he struggled when it came to mountains, like the mountain climbs up during the races. And he wanted to be better at the mountain climbs. And he realized that every time he would start to approach a mountain, he would start getting anxious. All these negative thoughts would go through his head. And he would struggle. And so he hired nutritionists and doctors and trainers and all these different people to figure out what physiologically was going on in his body that was keeping him from performing at his potential. And they found nothing. Like physically, he should be able to perform beyond what he was capable of. And so this friend of mine is actually a consultant with a company that helps individuals and like Fortune 500 companies deal with how we think, how that affects performance. And so my friend Doreen, one of her colleagues, actually asked George Hincapie, can I work with you and be your head coach? And he's like, well, yeah, I actually hadn't thought of that. That sounds great. So she started asking him a series of questions. And he was revealing to her, yeah, when I approach the mountains, I start getting nervous and anxious and all these thoughts go through my head. And he flat out just said, I'm just not a climber. And she said, well, when did you first start believing that? Because everything physiologically for you, that doesn't bear to be true. You actually should be a climber. So when did you first hear that message? You're not a climber. And so he thought about it for a minute, and then he just remembered this story of when he was a kid. They lived in South Carolina, and they'd go vacation in Colorado, and they'd go up into the mountains. And like their first day in the mountains, they'd go for these bike rides. Well, if you go from sea level to higher elevation, if you don't take time to adjust, you're going to, a lot of people can get altitude sickness. And so that's what George was feeling. He was getting altitude sickness every year they would go on these bike rides. But what his dad said to him was, George, you're just not a climber. And I'm sure his dad did not mean to give him a message that he was going to end up sanctioning and owning for the rest of his life. But that's what George ended up doing. And I mean, for gosh sakes, he's still an incredible professional athlete. I think he's overcome quite a bit, right? Even with that message. But that underlying message was hindering him from actually reaching his greatest potential. And so in taking that time to reflect, to have that revelation of, oh my gosh, who I know myself to be all these years has been hindering me from actually reaching my potential, he realized, oh my gosh, now what am I actually truly capable of? And you shouldn't be surprised to hear that he's actually started breaking his own records. And the mountain climbs were no longer a trigger for him. They were no longer challenging for him. And there's several really important things that we can get out of this belief, this idea of belief, and what we choose to believe about ourselves and who we know ourselves to be. He worked to own a liberating belief about himself rather than continuing to hold on to a limiting belief about himself. All too often, we make decisions on what has been instead of on what can be. The has been is limiting us. The can be will liberate us. So one limits, one liberates. So when you think about how you've been proceeding in your Arbonne business, what do you focus on? Every month are you like, oh, why do I even bother setting new goals? Because what has been is I set a goal, I work towards it, or maybe I don't as much as I should. But anyway, I'm doing something in my business and I get to the end of my month and I didn't reach my goals. So then I do the same thing the next month, then the next month. And the has been is limiting us because what we're building is a belief about ourselves that I'm somebody who can't accomplish my goals. I'm not trustworthy, even with myself, to follow through on what I said I would do. Yes, that's right. Shui, is that how you pronounce your name? Yeah, you shake your head. No way. That is not the voice that we want to be giving into. What we want instead is a liberating voice. I am a mountain climber. My dad didn't intend to plant that seed in my brain to last for decades. He just didn't realize that I had altitude sickness. There's grace for that. And now it's time to get down to business and really see what I'm capable of. You guys, we don't often perform at the level of our potential, but at the level of our belief. And it's often those beliefs that are limiting us. And when you can change that belief that you have about yourself, that not just try harder every month, oh, I'm going to set the same goals again, and maybe this month I can get it. If we have a belief that's limiting us, because it's based off what has been, you can't reach your potential. Your belief about who I know myself to be has to change for you to give yourself permission and freedom to go after that to go after your potential and actually perform at your potential, which is what George ended up doing. If we follow our triggers, so here's a little tip for you that we can learn from George. The triggers were the mountains. If you can take note of the thing that is your trigger, whatever your mountain is, and you follow that trigger and let it lead you to the limiting belief that you have, just like George did, and how you've sanctioned it, most likely unintentionally, then you can actually change who you know yourself to be And because you're going to realize that that trigger that's leading you to that belief that you have is not your truest self. It's not your truest true. It was not true that George wasn't a climber. You know what was truth for him? Poor kid was suffering from altitude sickness. He needed a couple days to adjust to the altitude, and then I bet you he could have ridden those bikes with the rest of the family just fine. So follow your trigger, and this is where it takes a little reflection, because you know what reflection does? It leads you to revelation. His reflection led him to that revelation where he could look it in the eye, he could challenge it, he could let go of what was limiting him, and then choose what was going to be more liberating for him, and then he could get down to business in pursuing his potential. So that's the key there. Reflection is important. Now, I don't mean spending days and days and days, going on trying to figure out what's my thing, but taking a little time to reflect will serve you so well. Pulling out a journal and just writing, or getting someone that you trust to bounce your thoughts and ideas off of, really helpful. So I'm going to share a couple of my mountains, my triggers with you, and see if you can identify with some of these. So, fear gripped me pretty big at the beginning of my business. And, like I said, 2 years in, I was that struggling area manager. Couple months before that GTC, where I was patting myself on the back for letting myself stay stuck, I attended my first ever retreat that Cecilia put on. Back then it was for area managers and you didn't have to wait till you were a VP. But there was a speaker there named Tom Barrett. He's an amazing speaker and author. Highly recommend his books. Tammy can tell you more of the titles if you haven't heard of him before. But he was speaking at Cecilia's retreat. And he started asking the whole room, so how many of you have ever been afraid to pick up the phone? Because back then, we made phone calls back then, but we still do that with our texting and our messaging and stuff now. So all these hands went up. How many of you have ever had a cancellation? All these hands going up. How many of you have ever had people ghost you? They even say they want more information about Arbonne, and then you go to give it to them, and then they fell off the face of the earth. So all these hands are going up. And I'm looking around the room thinking, are you serious? This isn't just me. And Tom Barrett said, first of all, you have to realize this is normal. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so liberating. It actually didn't scare me off thinking, are you kidding me? This is what my business is always going to be about, is these things. Forget it. That it didn't scare me off. It actually relieved me to know that what I was doing wasn't wrong and that it was what they call normal. And it's what my husband says. It's when you play football, you expect that you're going to get hit. You're going to get tackled. If you're not interested in taking a hit and getting tackled, you need to go play tennis, where you can't even be on the same side of the court as your opponent, And I love that analogy of okay, if I'm okay with getting hit from time to time, also, I want to build my skills so I can, make some touchdowns too. But if I can get to where I'm not afraid of being tackled, then what can I do? That's when the game gets exciting, right? And so part of my mountain of fear is I needed to be okay with letting the fear be there and it not directing my actions anymore. Another thing that I needed to do with my fear is I needed to confront it. So I saw that woman, she was earning her Mercedes, and I was so mad that I wasn't. And I came home from that retreat and I'm like, what is the deal, Alece? You have done other hard things in your life. You cannot tell me you can't do this Arbonne thing that is also hard. How can you do those other things and you can't do these things? I'm like, this fear, I can't get past it. And I was like, yes, you can. What are you so afraid of? So I went in my backyard and I took my journal and I wrote down every single fear I could think of. And then what I did was I had heard that fear stands for false evidence appearing real. So I was like, okay, if these fears are really false evidence and they're not even really real, I'm really going to be ticked that I've been letting for 2 years fear dictate my actions in my business. So I got to see if these are real or not. So I went through each and every fear that I had, and I'm like, is this real? Is this most likely to happen? Is this true? And you guys, most of them were not real. They were not true. They were things I had built up in my head that I had chosen to believe. And I was like, okay, well then done with that one. If it's not even real, why am I going to give it power? But then there were the few fears I had that could be real. They actually could happen. I could have friends totally disapprove of this decision so much and totally think that all I was coming to them with Arbonne for was a sale, that I saw dollar signs on their forehead and that was it. That could happen. And I had to ask myself, Alece, can you survive that? Because if my answer was no, I can't survive that, then I was never going to get past that fear. But if my answer was yes, I can survive it. I don't like it, but I can survive it, because again, those friends aren't giving me another alternative to work for any of us. And here I found a solution that could work for all of us. Every person gets the right to decide whether they choose it or not. And that's where I'm not going to be pushy and aggressive. If they don't want Arbonne, I can't force them to choose it. But I can still proceed with it for myself, with or without their blessing, preferably with their blessing. But I knew that I was like, Alece, if you know in your heart that you are pursuing them with every good intention to be a blessing to them, not to do something to them, but to do something for them, whether they see it as that or not, I can't own that. I have to own my own motives. And if my motives are pure and genuine and in the right place, then I have to keep giving this gift away. And I can't worry about what they think. And if they think differently, that's on them. And you know what? I can survive that. And you know what's happened in time is some of those people have come around and realized, Alece, I see now I was wrong in how I thought about this and what I said about you behind your back. And I knew they were saying it because those mutual friends were telling me what they were saying. That was hurtful. But again, I wasn't going to turn my power over to them. I've had some of those friends say, I was wrong, and I see why you do this, and it's good work, and you are changing lives, and I want to support you. I don't want to join your team, but I want to support you and encourage you and be someone who breathes life over you instead of discouraging you. And that's what some of those friends have been for me. Others still don't get it, and that's okay. As much as they're willing to let me engage them in conversation, fine, but I had to get back to the few fears that could be true. Can you survive them? And if you can, you have to move forward with or without the blessing showing up. You can survive a lot of the fears you have in Arbonne. You've just told yourself thus far that you can't. You've survived a lot harder in your life than this Arbonne business. I'm certain of it. If you can survive those other things, you can survive this. I promise. Another one of my mountains that I had to, so when that mountain of fear showed up, that trigger showed up, I could revisit that and be like, I'm not one who is fearful and shrinks back anymore. I changed that, who I know myself to be, to Alece is not one who shrinks back from fear. Alece is one who moves forward with courage. So it doesn't mean the fear's gone, but it means I still can move forward and I can be courageous. When I told myself a different story that is very true of me, actually it's more true. It's like my very best being called out of me, because that's what we do in Arbonne, right? Is we speak life over each other to call out the very best in each other. So when I do that for my team and I do that for myself, then I'm changing who I know myself to be, that belief in my head. I'm redirecting that detour. So I'm no longer going down that path that leads to death, I'm going to a different path that leads to life. And the more I tell myself that true story in the midst of my triggering mountain, I'm going to get a different result out of my business and out of my life. Cecilia talks about it this way, that we can't just put on more belief It's like we have to take off unbelief. She said it's like you going to put on your clothes for the day and you leave your pajamas on. So you put your clothes on over top of your pajamas. Like nobody does that. Or if you do, you know, it's very rare occasion. Maybe you have a good reason why. I don't know. But very seldom does that happen. You go to your closet, your drawer, the floor, you pick out something to wear, and you take off your pajamas and you put on new clothes. And Cecilia says belief is the same way. You have to take off this unbelief, this who you know yourself to be that's not serving you well, to put on belief. You know, we can put on as much Arbonne glitz and glam and studliness for you guys as we want, but unless we've taken off what's not serving us well, it doesn't matter how much we sparkle on the outside if we've still got our unbelief jammies on underneath. My daughter came to me one day and she was wearing, she said, Mom, I'm going to go for a bike ride with Daddy. And she's wearing her long sleeve, long pant jammies with her shorts and her t-shirt over top. She had her bike helmet and her bike pads and everything on. And I'm like, okay, did he dress you? And she said, no, I chose this. I want to wear this. I'm like, are you sure? You get pretty hot. And I don't know that wearing your jammies underneath your play clothes is a good idea. She's like, no, Mama, it'll be fine. Don't worry, Mama, it'll be fine. 5 minutes later, she's not back in the house, crying, sobbing, taking off all her helmet and everything. It's too hot. I can't bike with my jammies on. It's too hot. And I'm like, sweetie, I told you this. Come here. Let's take off your jammies so you can go back out and ride again. No, I'm done. I couldn't get her to go back outside. You guys, I think too often we think wearing our jammies underneath our cycling clothes is harmless enough. But what it does is it really inhibits us from doing the very thing we were designed to do. It keeps us from being our very best self. And so we're not able to bring our truest brand and Arbonne's truest brand, our truest self and story and Arbonne's truest story to the table, because we've got all this other stuff weighing us down and keeping us hot and bothered and inside having a pity party, rather than, all right, let's shed the layers and let's get back out there to do what we were meant to do. I'm a little kid and I should be outside playing and riding my bike. So we're Arbonne, powerful leaders. So we shouldn't be inside having our pity parties. We should be shedding those layers and getting out there and being about the business of changing lives. One more mountain that I had that was a trigger for me, and this was part of what kept me at regional vice president for 9 years. 9 years, you guys. Okay, it's a nice place to get stuck compared to district or area. But when you're a region for 9 years, I promise you, you get to a point where, will it ever happen? Will we ever be a nation? And it wasn't until I was chatting more with Cecilia that I realized that I had a mountain of uncertainty. I was uncertain about my ability to lead at the NVP level. I had built up in my mind that, okay, I can manage RVP. I've done that a long time, but can I do NVP? And so there was fear wrapped up in that, and there was uncertainty. I'd never led at that level before. How do you know you can do it? I don't know. Better stay safe. Better stay in RVP. You guys, I didn't think those things out loud to myself, but that was that underlying current. That was the, George, you're not a climber, that he didn't realize until he took time to reflect. And so in talking with Cecilia, she helped me reflect on that was holding me back from becoming a nation. And when I actually found the courage to express your doubt to the #1 income earner in Arbonne, you guys are like, oh, it must be so amazing to have Cecilia Stoll as your mentor. It is, and it's horrifying at the same time, because she's heard every excuse. She's heard, and then she's seen a lot of people succeed too, and it's easy to be like, oh, am I going to measure up to who she wants me to be? So it's easy to not ask for help. But when I asked for help, she was actually able to help me clear the smoke out of the room, see my situation for what it was, and then she could speak life and truth over me. And so when I finally admitted, I'm uncertain that I can lead at that level, she's like, Alece, what do you think leadership is? doing what you do, whatever it is you do, Cecilia. And she's like, leadership is, her definition is head servant. Can you serve many and show your team how to serve many? I was like, well, yeah, I've kind of been doing that for a long time. She's like, great. I said, but here's the deal. Like, I have team who struggle and I don't know how to help them in their struggles. She's like, Alece, it boils every struggle and every person's business comes down to to two things. Belief. Have you made the decision to believe? And are you speaking with passion and conviction with that belief? And two, do you have enough activity? Because if you don't have either of those, your business isn't going to grow. So she cleared, again, the smoke out of the room of, can I help my team at the NVP level? And she's like, Alece, it's belief, it's activity, or it's both. And she helped simplify leadership for me, that it's being a head servant. And when my team comes to me struggling, here's my questions. All right, let's engage on the belief level and let's engage on the activity level. And if there's anything missing there, then there's our homework. And then it's up to your teammates' decision to decide. You've done your job as a leader, is to help them reveal what's holding them back. And now it's on them to actually do something with it. Just like it was on me all those different times to do something. Cecilia was not calling me up and saying, I noticed that you're not hitting your bonus. I noticed you didn't hit your goals. I noticed you're not an NVP yet. None of that ever, not even a single ounce of it. And so for us to get to that point where we can say, okay, who I know myself to be is no longer going to be limiting, but it's going to be liberating. And I'm going to ask for help when I need it. But if I'm going to ask for help, I darn well better be ready to do what my leader tells me to do, or I can't keep going back and asking for help. I mean, you can ask for it to get the information you need. But then until you've done what Tammy and your other leaders tell you to do, then that's actually your first homework, is to do what they tell you to do. Okay? And so that doesn't mean that if you're struggling figuring out what your mountains and your triggers are, pursue them again, because they want to help you uncover those so you can get through them. They want to be that consultant, that head coach for you, like George needed. But if you know where you're struggling and you're just not to the point where you're ready to do what you need to do yet, then that's where you need to wrestle with yourself. So I just want y'all to believe that anything is possible. And I see that I'm running out of time, but I'm going to shoot Tammy a list of stories of real Arbonne NVPs who either they themselves or someone on their team was about mid-month hovering around 2,500 to about 6,000 in volume. All these stories fit within that volume frame. Mid-month, so like the 14th of April, and we're not even at the 14th yet here in April. Mid-month, they were anywhere between 2,500 and 6,000 in volume. And they attended a training. They had this shift mid-month, and they went home. And by the end of the month, they were in qualifications for regional vice president. You guys, if that can happen for multiple people, it wasn't just one or two stories. This is a list of stories. And there were a lot more, but I could only capture so many for this training that I did at the AIT trip last October. I'll send you the ones that I have. But if they can do it, why not you? Why can't you go from 2,500 into qualifications for regional vice president by the end of this month? But you know what? Even if that feels too big to dream, would you be okay with qualifications for area? Yes, of course you would. And we would all celebrate you for that. You don't have to go all the way to region for us to celebrate you. That's a great jump from 2,500, even jumping from 6,000 to 10,000. That's awesome. We're going to celebrate you. We're not going to shame you or judge you if you don't hit that. But what if your name got to be on that list of people who were hovering around 2,500 to 6,000 for months? And then mid-month, or we'll just say April 8th, you have a shift that takes you beyond what you could even imagine. This one story, Andrea Langcomer-Smith, she's actually here in the Philly area near me. She and her team had been doing area bonusing numbers for like 4 months in a row. So that's around like 20,000, right? She thought going to 40,000 was too big, but she didn't tell her team she had those doubts. She just thought that. And she finally decided that she had to stop standing in her team's way with her own belief about that. And so she started to act on the belief. Guess what she and her team did? They went from area bonusing numbers they jumped from 20,000-ish to 103,000 the very next month. Not only did they like blow past region, although you have to take 2 months to finish region, but I mean, she was well on her way to nation at that point. Can you imagine making a jump from 20,000 to 103? Guys, we'd take a fraction of that, wouldn't we? But I want to blow your expectation like up big as to what's possible. What is possible for you when you start believing in the possibilities and in your potential, and you stop locking on to what has been. Oh, I'm a struggling district manager. I'm a struggling area manager. I've never hit my DM bonus. How am I ever going to go area qual? When you stop locking on to what has been, like, because when you lock on, you lock out what can be. So when you can stop locking on to the limiting beliefs that are locking out the liberating ones, you're going to find things to really start to shift. So I got to ask you a couple questions, and then I'll answer your questions. But you need to ask yourself, have you decided? Truly decided? I thought I had decided until Tanya's story like outed me basically and proved that I hadn't. If you have not decided, there's step one of your homework. You got to start there. Okay, if you've decided, are your words moving people? Like, are you really so passionate about what the hope Arbonne has to give, either through health from our products or wealth through our business? Are you so passionate about that people can hear it, that your words move them when you talk to them, that they can't believe they're considering doing this because of how you speak about it? If you aren't speaking with passion and conviction, then you have to engage. My next question for you is, then what are the mountains you're facing right now that are keeping you distracted, deterred, discouraged, and disbelieving? So if you can't speak with passion, then there's a mountain that is your trigger. And if you will allow yourself to engage some reflection so you can have the revelation, so you can find what belief you've been locking on to that's not serving you well, so that you can change that belief to one that does serve you well, so that you can liberate yourself to live out your potential, just like George Hincapie did, amazing things are going to happen. Have you taken off your PJs, your fear PJs, your unbelief PJs, your I'm a disappointment pajamas? Have you taken off what's not serving you well and not just put on what has served you well? And then are you ready for what you're doing to be contagious? Because for all these stories that I'm going to send Tammy, and she'll post them for y'all on your team page, of these people who went from 2,500 to 40,000 or 6,000 to 40,000 in 2 weeks, they could not do that on their own. So what do you think happened? They decided to believe, they acted on that belief, and it became seriously contagious. So people believed them, and the passion and the conviction they were speaking with, that was contagious. Their teams started speaking with passion and conviction and belief. And when you got enough people doing that, the numbers are going to add up fast. And that's how you can go from 2,500 by the 14th of the month and hit 40,000, over 40,000 in 2 weeks. So if what you have, do you want what you have right now to be contagious? I guess is the last good question. If you have unbelief, do not want that to be contagious, right? What we want to be contagious is passion, conviction, and full on belief. Because you know what, guys? It's time. It is time to believe big. It's time to believe true. There's some serious work of renewal and restoration, and it can start happening immediately. It happens here first in your brain, redirecting that circuitry, and then it happens in your actions as you keep following it up month after month. And it happens with the words you allow yourself to speak, both outward, but also the words you speak in your head, and which ones you stop allowing yourself to speak. And so if you let this renewal and restoration happen for you, I don't know about you, but I'm ready to start breaking some of my own records, just like George Hincapie, and I think we can all do it together. So I hope you got some kind of nugget. I mean, that is my story condensed. Those are the things that have truly transformed me and therefore transformed my business, transformed my teammates. I have some teammates. So there's 3 people I took to Oklahoma with me. 2 of them are still with me. 2 of them are still with me. One of them's a region and one's on the verge of being a region. So, and the 3rd gal who's not with me anymore, she has brought me so much business that I still get to nurture because she was a part of my business for a while. So, and all those other friends who did never end up joining me, I feel, I have compassion for them, but isn't it awesome that you don't need your closest friends to be on board with Arbonne for you to succeed? That's so encouraging. That's comforting to me. So it looks like maybe some of y'all have sent some questions. I'll check real quick and see. If you have other questions, type them in the little chat feature and I'll look at them. And then Tammy, I'll turn things over to you to wrap us up. Since you have friends who still have never signed up, who were your first independent consultants? This is a good one. Where did you reach them and what did you say to them? So back when I started, there was no preferred client thing. It was either consultant or full price. And so most people got a consultant ID just for the discount. So I had a lot of consultants in the beginning who were just discount shoppers. But I think what you mean by this, and your question is, where did my first business builders come from? So my very first business builder is one of those gals who ended up going to, she was the only teammate I had at GTC that year. She went to Oklahoma with me, and she's on the verge of becoming a region. She's already promoted a region underneath her. But she was an acquaintance. I knew her husband because her husband and I had worked together. And when I was first getting my business started that first summer, I got my ID in March, I got my products and had my first presentation at my home in April. I did my own first presentation in July. I mean, you guys see how slow I was. I was really scared and letting fear dictate how much I was doing. But I asked this gal, Krista, if she'd have a presentation for me. And she said, no, I'm really busy, but I'll do one in the fall. Have you ever heard that? People put you off for 3 months. I was like, great, that's going to ever happen. So I didn't do my job. I didn't follow up with her. But you know what she did? Because she's an amazing person. That fall, she called me and said, I'm ready now to do that presentation for you. You guys, there are people out there that are that awesome that you may not deserve yet, but there's still going to be this blessing that's just given to you in your business. Give thanks for them when they show up and lock onto them and love them well, because she became my first business builder. We had the presentation. It was a disaster. She wanted to have dinner and these get to know you games, and all of that was fine, but it took away all the time to share about Arbonne. And so that left me 20 minutes to share about Arbonne and what makes us different. You can do that in 20 minutes. Back then, the presentations were 3 hours. So how am I going to condense 3 hours to 20 minutes? But I did my best. And all of her friends wanted to hear more. And I was like, oh, okay, wow, this is encouraging. And then my sponsor encouraged me to invite her to this all-day training in Philly. I'm like, why would I invite her? She's not a business builder. And my upline said, well, you don't know unless you ask. So I was like, okay, I'll ask her. But I felt so sheepish asking her because she had never told me. Krista had never said, I'm interested in this business. So I call her, Krista, would you, I don't know why, but would you want to go to this all-day training with me? Arbonne? Yes, I'd love to go. What? Why would you waste? It wasn't a waste of a day for me because I had committed to Arbonne. She was just using some products. But here she had been looking on the website, learning more about Arbonne. If I hadn't listened to my upline who said invite her to go, I wouldn't have. Krista would have said something eventually. But when she went to that event, we talked the whole drive to Philly, because that's like 2 hours away. And she told me all the reasons why things weren't going well in her life like she had hoped. And that if she saw something in Arbonne that day that matched her, she would dive into this. And so at lunchtime, when we took a break for lunch at that training, she said, Alece, this company is all about empowering women, and that is really important to me, and I am all in. So I hope you hear in that there's a lot I didn't do right in pursuing my first business builder. She was a gift. It was the right person at the right time. I did listen to my upline to invite her to the event. I did take the 20 minutes that I had to work with at her presentation and do the best I could. But you guys, I think a lot of times we set ourselves up for, I've got to do everything perfectly to get a business builder. And it's like, you know what? We just got to show up and be our most authentic self, speak with passion and conviction, love on people well, give people opportunities to learn more, like that event that I needed to have invited her to. And she said yes to the business. And she was a consistent business builder for years. She stopped the business for 8 years. But when the people she brought on underneath her, and she had multiple teammates, when they stayed and went region, guess who came back to her business? Krista did, because she saw that it could work for her downline to get to region, and she saw me go nation, and she said, what have I been doing putting this aside for 8 years? Yes, she had 3 children in that time frame, and a lot of life happened to her. There's grace for that, but she's back now, and I'm so thrilled because she's an amazing person. My second business builder ever was a stranger that I met at a group presentation. And so and back then I was so scared to talk about the business. I don't know why, because it was good enough for me. And the woman who gave the presentation that I went to gave a really powerful story about Arbonne that made me say yes to the business. She spoke with passion and conviction. I wasn't speaking with passion and conviction about the business. You know what I said at my group presentations? Here's what I said. And we have a wonderful business opportunity connected to this. So if you'd like more information about that, please let me know. Oh my gosh. No passion, no conviction, no story, no hope. That sounds like the lady down the street who's selling children's books, which I love her and I like her children's books, but you guys, that moves no one. Well, that little bit, again, I didn't do anything really right. But that woman at that presentation was like, my husband and I have been praying for an answer. I think this is it. Because you know what she did fall in love with? Not me, but she fell in love with what Arbonne, the company, was about. She was looking for natural, pure, safe, and beneficial. And she was looking for a way to earn extra income to take the stress off of her husband. All she needed to hear was business opportunity. So even though I said it with zero passion and conviction and didn't give any other story behind it, she saw enough and she wanted it and she ran with it. So those are my first 2 business builders. Other friends started to come in after a while. They're like, you haven't quit yet. Why not? That's what one friend said to me. You should have quit by now. Why are you still doing Arbonne? And so she's like, what are you going to make at your next promotion? And that was going to be regional vice president. I said, well, the average income there is $6,000 a month. She's like, why didn't you tell me? I said, I tried and you shot me down. And she said, well, I am listening now. So you guys, sometimes it's just staying. It's staying long enough for your friends to say, why haven't you quit? Because she said to me, my friend, I'm going to have to take a 3rd job to pay my bills. You haven't quit for a reason, and I need to know what kind of income is available to you that you're staying with this. So she joined me. And you just keep doing the right things and you add passion and conviction to it. You guys, you're going to find your teammates a lot faster than I found mine. It took me 3 years to go from consultant to region, and I was proud of myself. But then I let life settle in between that 3 years and that ninth, how many years? 12 years. So I'd been in Arbonne 12 years by the time I went nation. I let a lot of life settle in, and I just needed to go back to what I had learned to begin with, and then have a little more of Cecilia encourage me and help me stop locking on to what wasn't serving me well and start locking into what was going to actually free me. So I hope that helps a little bit in hearing like where your first teammates can come from. It's from you showing up and you giving your very best story, Arbonne's true story, not a watered down version, your best self, your brand shining in all its, and all you have to give, being authentic and who you were made to be, and your tribe will find you. Your tribe will come to you, but you have to be showing up. You have to be doing activities so people can interface with you and see what you have to offer and see what Arbonne has to offer. Looks like Eli said, what did making the decision look like in the very beginning? And what did you do to keep yourself organized and on track with your goals? Oh my gosh. Alece is not who you want to hear from about organization. I am not that. I'm too type B for organization in the way that I'd like to be. But I have some really amazing type A people on my team. And so they teach me things all the time. So I think for me, I've got to see it to, if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. So with goals in particular, what do you want? Put it somewhere where you're going to see it every day. Write it down and put it on your dashboard, on your windshield. I mean, not blocking your view where you can't drive, but you get the picture. On your mirror in your bathroom, wherever you show up every day, like in your refrigerator. I don't know about you, but I just kind of gloss over what's on the outside of the refrigerator, but it's what's in the refrigerator that gets my attention. Have a little card in there, like your goal, like what your affirmations are about yourself. As long as you can see it every day, then honestly, organization, I get these little planners that are supposed to like help you stay organized, you guys. Oh, it's pitiful. I don't know if I can find one fast enough for you, but you're supposed to take a day like this and fill in your appointments. This is where I just write all over it. Like I just write things on top. It's like these graphs shouldn't even be there. So it's horrible. I hope that's an encouragement though, that if you are more type B, you don't have to get your act together to be an NVP. I was so encouraged when I got to NVP and found there were other NVPs who were type Bs too, because I thought, oh, well, maybe I was the fluke type B person who got to NVP, and now it's not going to last, But I'd say if you have a system that can work for you, putting things in your phone with an alarm to keep you on task, to keep you organized. I create notes in my phone, but I'm not very organized with my notes, so it takes me a while to find things. So I need help. So if any of you can lead a session on that, that would be great.
Yeah, so I'm kind of the same way. That's why I asked that question. If I don't feel challenged enough, then I'll keep putting it off, and then eventually, it just builds up, and then you don't even do what you said you were going to do, or you're so stressed out like 2 days before an event or something, you're trying to put everything together, send out invites, and handle everything, and it's just impossible. So I've been really struggling with that, like procrastination mostly.
Yeah, I totally hear you. I can identify with everything you just said. There are some things, again, work with your personality, but I did find that when I was doing events, I needed a day where I wasn't booking any events at all. And it was just my get everything back in order day. So get all the paperwork. Like back then we used a lot of paperwork. Now so much is, through our phones. You don't necessarily have to have, here's your order sheet. Here's your client profile to fill everything out by hand. I mean, it's fine if you still do that, because I still sometimes do that too. But whatever method you're using, whether it's online, virtual, it's digital, it's handwritten, whatever that is, schedule a space where you can just bring all that back to order so that you're not losing track of things or not falling through the cracks. For us, our nutrition detox groups start, on Mondays. So that means on Sundays, I'm checking in with all my detoxers. I'm sending all those messages. And we use a tracker that is on the source with Arbonne. Arbonne actually pursued Mindy Preddy and Tracy Schuetz, who Mindy is the one who taught me how to do the 30-day nutrition program, because Cecilia actually hadn't done any of that. So I was like, Cecilia, I'm interested in how to be successful with the nutrition. Can I talk to Mindy? She's like, yeah, go for it. So Mindy gave me all these resources, but because they've been so successful in Arbonne with the nutrition, Arbonne's like, Mindy, help us do what y'all have created. So the trackers are really helpful so that you are on, you're not letting things fall through the crack with your detoxers. But then if you're actually doing like a lot of group events still, for me, I just needed a slot, like a space in my life that I knew that was like my office hours, so to speak, and not just office hours to like return messages or whatever, but to like get everything that had happened in the past week back in order, restock all my paperwork, clean all my products, get everything organized and ready to go again, so that when my next event came up, all I had to do was grab and go, so that I wasn't so stressed. So maybe you'll find a space like that. I don't know, maybe Tuesday nights or Saturday morning or whatever is kind of like a little bit of a dead space that you never are able to end up booking a presentation anyway, or a one-on-one, and fill that with get myself together time maybe. But if you also find that you're actually doing okay without all that, and you're really just stressing yourself out about who you think you should be about that, set yourself free from it. Your NVP should have a website with everything all organized and laid out in terms of what your team is going to need. So if your team is type A and you're not, they're not stressed out because they're relying completely on you, Eli, to point them in the right direction for everything. When you're like, I've got a system that works for me, but I couldn't teach this to anybody unless they're type B and they'll figure it out on their own, just like I did. You need to be able to say, our NVP's website has everything you need. We're going to go there. We'll work through this. And sometimes that's helpful for me when I have a teammate that's type A. I have to to help them get started, I've got to go back to the basics and say, okay, let's pull up our getting started materials. Let's walk through this. I'm like, oh yeah, I need to actually be doing a little bit more of this. And helping them actually helps me. But when I just set myself free to not have those expectations over myself, not that I don't want to get better at some of those things, but that it's like, you know what? God's made me in such a way that I don't need it to all be organized. That's okay. But I think being willing to grow there too, if you are letting things slip through the cracks, is important. And you said, what did it look like in the very beginning, making the decision look like in the beginning?
Like keeping that belief alive, like you go to the events and it's awesome. You're so pumped about Arbonne and people can tell the conviction and passion in your voice right away. And then slowly over time, it's like you start getting a few no's and then more and more. And then just like stuff gets in the way, whatever. And obviously you have to like keep yourself motivated through it all. And like what was your daily method of operation, I guess, in the beginning?
Yeah, in the beginning, it was back then we didn't have the 30-day nutrition program, so we didn't have these incredible stories of lives that we had totally changed to remind us. I mean, Tammy and I were talking about this last night that, now if you have a bad day or you're tempted to think, thoughts that don't serve you well, you just go back to, oh my gosh, look at all these people and how their lives are totally transformed because of what we taught them through the 30-day program or through helping them make some healthier choices. So it's so much easier to get on track these days. For me in the beginning, it was mostly skincare. I was not a skincare girl. So that was hard for me. I really had to, here's what helped me. Back then, Ion Arbonne stories came in every order shipment that we got. So it was stories of RVPs and NVPs who had succeeded. And what kept me in the game and continuing to decide that this would work for me was every time I got an order, I would read those stories. I collected them. I hoarded. I still have so many of those stories because they were my lifeline, that if it can work for them, it's got to work for me. If it can work for them, it's got to work for me. And I just kept going out. Like you heard me say, I was doing events with not a lot of passion and conviction, but I still kept showing up. And I think more people would have joined me faster if I'd had passion and conviction. But at least my showing up found those people like Krista, my first business builder, and Heather, my second business builder, who didn't need me to say all the right thing. They just needed to hear what Arbonne had to offer. And they're like, oh, good, this is exactly what I'm looking for. Tell me, I'm ready. And you're like, whoa, that was like too easy. So connecting to stories is important. Arbonne's starting to put those Eye on Arbonnes back in orders now because we've asked them to, which is great, but you can find them online. And then you can I also, especially from going region to nation, I went to YouTube and I would search for Discover Arbonnes, like hearing from a variety of different backgrounds. I had Cecilia's pretty much memorized, but I wanted to hear from men. I wanted to hear from millennials. I wanted to hear from a whole variety of different people who had, I wanted to hear from physicians. Like, how does a physician decide to do Arbonne? Like, I needed to hear why they made this. So I would look for Discover Arbonnes to listen to. Now, I'm going to encourage y'all to go to Tammy and go to, is Kathy your NVP? Is that right? You go to
it would be Carol.
Yeah, Carol. That's what I mean to say. Yeah, Carol. She's so sweet. You go to your NVP and your RVP and your NVP for their Discover Arbonnes first. That's where you start, is whatever materials they have, that's the stories you want to listen to first. Because otherwise you could waste a lot of time surfing YouTube looking for Discover Arbonnes, and that's not income producing. But sometimes you do need those stories to help build your beliefs so that you can go do your income producing with more passion and conviction.
Thank you. Yeah, we actually just talked about the Eye on Arbonnes the last call I was on.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, they're great. They kept me in the game. I'm serious. And I kept my favorite ones for sure. And I would find ones like one for a nurse. I'm like, oh, this is so going to speak to my friend, my neighbor. And I would take a Post-it note and write their name on it. And when I had some courage to reach out, I would take one of those and I would send it to them because I was too scared to get on the phone, but I would mail it to them. Okay. I know that mailing things is like 90s. But we do things differently now, but it's that same idea. You come across a story that's really inspiring. It makes you think of somebody else. You're like, oh my gosh, picking up my phone and I'm messaging right now my friend and saying, hey, I just read this story and it totally made me think of you. And then hit send and send the story. That's all you have to say. Get stuff in their hands, because you know what? It takes multiple exposures for people to say yes, be willing to hear more, and that's another exposure. So take advantage of really awesome stories that are out there.
I like that. Thank you.
You are so welcome. Yeah.
I love it. Alece, you have gone above and beyond. So thank you. This was I want everyone here to know that this was a glimpse of GTC. And Alece, you need to be on the GTC stage because you are incredible. You're so captivating.
Oh my gosh.
Just break it down to the most simplest, way to understand. And that is the sign of a true leader. And oh my goodness, I'm emotional right now. You fed us tonight. You poured into us, and thank you so much. I love how you said we do not often perform at our potential. We perform at the level of our belief. That really hit me, and I've heard it before, but it hit me tonight coming from you, and it just made me think over and over and believe with all my heart in my team that we are all so much closer than we think.
Yes.
And that's all it is just pushing through our self-imposed limits, and changing our thinking, because we're all so much closer than we think. So thank you so much, everyone, for hanging in there tonight. This was worth every single minute. Worth so amazing. Thank you and love you. And oh my goodness, you honestly, this is like a solid gold training. Thank you so much.
Oh, You guys, it's my pleasure. And it's my story, but it's also like pure science. Like my friend Doreen, who does the consulting with like how your brain, how what you think affects performance. A lot of the George Hincapie and the locking on and locking out, performing at your level of belief and, you know, not at your potential, that is all from the science, like her, that's from her. And it totally lines up with Arbonne, so it completely fits. But I want you to know those aren't just Alece's, like, good words from the top. That's like true science stuff. You can trust that. You can take that to the bank and run with it in any area of your life. So I just wanted to throw that little bit in there. Thank you for the compliment, but it's not all me. And that means you can believe in it even more, that it's not just from me. So, but thank you for the time, and thank you for hanging in there with me. I hope you found something that was can be a gift to you.
You are a gift. This has been more than a gift. Thank you. Love you so much.
My pleasure. Love you too. Can't wait to see y'all at GTC.